Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports, and I'm very excited to be covering my NBA 2K23 ratings in this video. This video was requested by a few users on the channel in the comments section, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to record, specifically because when you consider going through the entire league, giving ratings for every single player that's on a roster, it's one of the few and rare opportunities that I get to give my thoughts and analysis on pretty much every single player in the NBA, all 450 of them, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm not going to talk about every single player at length. Some players' names might not even get said out loud, but their names are going to be on the screen for the most part. If you guys are enjoying the content and the work that goes into these videos, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. A little bit of a disclaimer, this video took way longer than I was expecting to make, specifically when it comes to actually rationalizing why certain players would get what grades, and kind of making sure that I felt pretty good about everything I was putting out there. And to be honest, I do feel like I do a better job than NBA 2K does. I did not look at 2K's ratings in NBA 2K22. Quite frankly, I don't care what their ratings are. I feel like I trust my eye test more than the developers at NBA 2K. So that's just a little disclaimer there. So if you guys are enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like. Video preview here. This will be my ratings for mostly every NBA player that is currently rostered. I did exclude some two-way contracts because I mostly feel like a lot of those guys will not end up becoming prominent players, and I just didn't think it was worth the time or effort to include them, and then also to have you guys, looking at their rating that I gave them, because honestly, a lot of them I don't really care about in terms of what their impact is going to be in the league. Some two-way guys are on there because I think they'll actually become somewhat prominent players. And then when you look at incoming rookies, we have a lot of NBA draft fans here that watch our channel, and I think this is going to be the part that a lot of you look forward to. I have my 16 rookies that I would put at the top for 2K23 ratings, And remember, this is not going to be indicative of my big board. This is based on 2K23 ratings, not 2K27 or 2K28, which means that it is not about long-term projectable upside. It's not about how good a player is going to be 4 or 5 years from now. It's about how good I think a player is going to be next season. So it's going to be pretty fun to actually talk about, because there's going to be some different players that will be at the end of the video. I'm hoping to have cards in here as well to help you guys along with timestamps and everything to make it much easier to follow. So we're going to be talking about all 30 NBA teams in alphabetical order by team name, which lets us start here with the 76ers. You notice I've got Joel Embiid as a 97, clearly one of the most dominant players in the league. And just a little disclaimer here too, I'm a little bit more harsh than NBA 2K is when it comes to the ratings. You can see there with DeAndre Jordan being a 61 overall. In fact, I feel like maybe I was being a little too optimistic on him with that 61 rating. He was clearly one of the worst players in the league this year. But there's also some players in here that I think people are going to have questions about. James Harden, I left him in the 90s. Some people are going to say, really? James Harden played hurt this year. Anyone who's been watching James Harden for the last 5, 6, 7 years knows it. Harden did not look like himself. That's because he's still rehabbing from that injured hamstring. Same thing that happened to Chris Paul a few years ago. Look at Chris Paul's last year in Houston. Compare that to James Harden's last season in Brooklyn and started first season in Philadelphia. They're fairly similar in terms of the efficiency drop-off and all of that. I think James Harden comes back next year much better. 90 overall, I still think is deserved. And by the way, his down year was 22-10, which most NBA players would kill for, honestly. Then you look at some of the other guys, Tyrese Maxey, 84. I think that's about fair for him. He's a good young player. I don't think he's quite to the level of guys like Darius Garland, though, and some other guys who are in the higher 80s realm. So I think 84 plays out pretty fair. Tobias Harris, one of the more underrated players. Yes, he's on a bad contract, but it doesn't mean he's a bad player. It shouldn't drop his overall in 2K just because he's expensive. Now, obviously, would you want to give a max contract to an 84 overall player? No. But that's the reality the 76ers find themselves in. Realistically, you can look at the rest of them on the roster here. I'll give you about another 3 seconds here or so to look it through. Maybe pause the video as well if you want to get a little bit more of a look at some of the other names on there. I'm sure there's some other questions. If you guys want to hear my rationale on why certain guys got certain ratings, feel free to ask in the comment section. Then let's go on to the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's the headliner, 99 overall. He's the only 99 overall player I have. I think he has clearly cemented himself as the best player in the league and arguably the face of the entire NBA. He gets better each and every year. Giannis does it on both ends of the floor. 99 overall almost feels too low for him. Yes, his jump shot is a little whack, but for the most part, he's even improved in that regard. You can't leave him wide open because he could possibly go 3 of 8, which is 37.5% on certain nights. And if he does that, you're probably going to lose a game because of how good he is. And by the way, he just hustles all the time, and he's a terribly difficult player to play against, I'm assuming, because not only is he great, talented, really improved as a passer, but he brings it all every single night. You got to love that about him. Then you look at Middleton, Drew Holiday. I mean, I think those ratings are about right. I think Middleton's a little bit better of a player than Drew Holiday. Yes, Drew is a better defender, but Middleton offensively is more important to Milwaukee, I think. And when you look at his capability in the pick and roll, it's vital. Wesley Matthews, that 75 rating, maybe feels a little high for some of you looking at that. You're going to notice that I kind of settled on 75 for quite a few role players in the Wesley Matthews type of role, where they're going to play 3-and-D, and they're going to be experienced veterans who are really reliable. Wesley Matthews probably would have been a 71, 72 overall before the series against the Boston Celtics, where he really did force Jason Tatum into some struggles, specifically the front half of that series. Now, obviously, Tatum and the Celtics triumphed in that series against Milwaukee, but Wesley Matthews kind of restored his name in some league circles, and I think for me, kind of pulled himself back into that 75 overall rating area. Also, shout out to the Milwaukee Bucks for having so many long names on their team. You look at Connaughton, Antetokounmpo again, Mamukelashvili. They've got all the long names, it seems like, in the NBA. Moving on to the Chicago Bulls, they got DeMar DeRozan. He restored his name as well, back to a 91 overall. Making an All-NBA team definitely puts you back up in that 90s tier, or at least around it. I think he's very deserving of that 91 overall. He was the best player for Chicago this season, which I don't think a lot of people were expecting. You looked at this as kind of a building around Zach LaVine, and then DeRozan ended up outplaying Zach this season. Now, I think long-term, Zach LaVine's the player I'd still rather have, but going into this next season, DeRozan played better. He deserves a higher rating. Then I think Patrick Williams, that's going to be one that some people have questions about. I have him as an 81 overall. I think for me, he's an improved playmaker. Only played in a handful of games this season because of injury, but ultimately he has gotten better since where he was when they drafted him fourth overall out of Florida State. And for me, when you look at Patrick Williams, I think you have to settle on the idea that he's going to keep getting better. And based on what I've seen, I think there's enough there. And there are also going to be some questions about having Alex Caruso above Nikola Vucevic. Vucevic's efficiency was way down this year. He does not protect the rim at an elite level. And he's also someone who does not want to switch on into the perimeter. And I think ultimately, if you're looking at Chicago wanting to take the step, it's got to be a Rudy Gobert trade. I think if you move off of Vucevic and future assets and you bring in Rudy Gobert, I think this team could be dangerous enough to compete in the Eastern Conference to the point where maybe they could knock down a Milwaukee or a Boston. Not a guarantee that they do, but I think they'd have a much better shot at it. And I think with Vucevic, 80 overall, probably right about where it belongs. Then we go on to Cleveland, and that top trio, so talented. Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley. And I think I nailed it with these ratings there for those three specifically. And then you go around, another player I want to talk about, Kevin Love. He had a very good season, finished second in Sixth Man of the Year voting. And it was a much needed season after getting basically booted off of Team USA in their pursuit of a gold medal. Kevin Love's career looked like it was essentially over, and that we were going to wait for the Cavs to finish that contract out. Maybe Love would get a couple chances on some minimums, and that would be that. Kevin Love has restored his name as well, and I've loved talking about the players who've restored their name. I like seeing players extend their careers. I don't want anyone to struggle in the NBA. I like watching good competitive basketball, and that's what Kevin Love got back to this year. He is definitely deserving of an 80 overall in my estimation. And you look at a guy like Dean Wade at 73 overall, a player who is more unknown, especially among casual fans. He had a nice role on this Cavs team as well. I considered rating him a little bit higher, but just with where Isaac Okoro, I decided to rate him. With Cedi Osman, I had to keep him below those two guys. So I had him at a 73, but I still think fairly well deserved for that 73 rating. He could be maybe a little bit higher even. Going into Boston here now, team that's representing the East in the NBA Finals. And you see I gave them a lot of love. They have the most players in the 80 overall tier or above. And I think, again, it's really well deserved here. Jason Tatum has ascended into stardom, specifically superstardom. He has grown so much as a playmaker. I know that's been the big narrative around him this postseason, and it's right on the money. That narrative is very accurate. But I think the biggest thing with Jason Tatum, he's such an all-around player. He does it on both ends of the floor. He's got the do-it-himself mentality. He can close out games. I love everything that this kid's become. Robert Williams, I have him as an 85. I know some people are going to say that's pretty high. He's one of the most impactful defensive players in the league. I think realistically, he was the best defensive player on Boston this year. Even though Marcus Smart won Defensive Player of the Year, I thought Rob Williams was more impactful, more important for that style and that scheme. And I would have voted him myself for Defensive Player of the Year. And then Grant Williams, Derek White, those two have really stepped up their play in big moments. Specifically Grant Williams, I think 80 overall, very deserved. He is someone who is going to be chippy, make the right plays, knock down open shots. He does everything you need to do to win. And if you're not going to give someone who does all the right things an 80 overall, I don't really know who's deserving of an 80 overall then for me, because I think Grant Williams, a player who is very deserving of that status. Then Aaron Nesmith as well. I have him as a 72, which is probably a surprise to Celtics fans. He does not get a lot of minutes, but when he does have minutes, he showcases a lot of athleticism, some shot making potential. I liked him a lot coming out of Vanderbilt. I still think there's some stuff for him to unlock there that down the road he could probably pull out and maybe become a valuable NBA player at some point. So 72, I still think he's a playable NBA player, but more so toward the back end, which I think 72 is fairly indicative of. Moving on to our next team, the Los Angeles Clippers here. And Kawhi Leonard, he's the player I want to start talking about here first. 95 overall, a very high rating for a player coming off the torn ACL who missed the entire season. I almost went higher. I thought 96, 97, maybe even 98. I think when Kawhi Leonard's healthy, he's one of the few guys that has a conversation with Giannis about being the best player in the league because he does it so well on both ends of the floor. And you're going to notice in my ratings, players who are good defensively do get a boost, and players who are not good defensively tend to fall maybe a couple overall. And for me with Kawhi Leonard, a player who does both at such an elite level, Kawhi Leonard's gotten so much better as a passer from his time in San Antonio. He's gotten so much better as a moving shot creator, specifically in the pick and roll game. He's got one of the best mid-range pull-up games in the entire league. And again, the defensive intangibles, his IQ, his ability to make plays defensively. We haven't seen him be as much of the stopper that he was in San Antonio, but he's really transitioned into one of the best defensive playmakers. And the fact that he can just turn it on at times as well and become that stopper again, we've seen it in the postseason before, specifically the last playoffs that the Clippers were in against the Dallas Mavericks. Game 6, Game 7, Kawhi Leonard really quieted Luka Doncic down. I think Kawhi is one of the few people in the world that can slow down Luka, and for that, I still think he's deserving of a very high 90s rating. And then you look at the depth of this team as well. There's so many players that I wanted to have in that 75, 76, 77, 78 range because this team is so darn deep. And I think Brandon Boston down the road is going to get better. I think Jason Preston down the road is going to get better. Isaiah Hartenstein had a really nice season for them as well. Ivica Zubac, I'm lower than on most, but he's still a quality center that I think is deserving of NBA minutes, specifically in the regular season. And Amir Coffey at 74, I feel like I underrated him as well. This team is really good. I think a lot of people overlook Luke Kennard as well. Go check Luke Kennard's stats right now. Pause the video, go check him, come back. You're going to be surprised about how well he played this year. You could also look at his last year in Detroit. Played really well statistically. He's a very nice shooter, whether that's on the move or off the dribble, handles it pretty well in the pick and roll game. And I think he's one of the more sneaky players in the league. For me, the one issue with him is he's got to find that confidence when Kawhi Leonard's in the actual lineup, because Kennard tends to defer when PG and Kawhi are on the floor. And if I'm coaching, if I'm Ty Lue there in LA, I'm saying, Kennard, we want you to be aggressive. We want you to be that bench outlet scorer for us when Kawhi and PG are still in the game. It helps take off the pressure and really fill out the rest of this team. And I mean, this team's just full of dogs. They've got a lot of talented players. So if you're a Clippers fan, congratulations. Your front office is genius. Your talent is amazing. And Kawhi Leonard is a beast. The Memphis Grizzlies here. John Morant, 92 overall. I feel like that's right in that wheelhouse where, you're looking at a top 10 player in the world. And for me, that's really well deserved. And then you've got a collection of players, again, where you have a nice rotation of depth. Desmond Bane really took a massive step forward this year, 85 overall. I feel very fitting for his performance. Xavier Tillman, I had him down to a 71. Had I done this last offseason, he probably would have been a 76, 77. Did have a down year, though. He just did not perform at the same level. I do think he can jump back up to that 74, 75, maybe 76, 77 range with ratings by next offseason. If he just plays a little bit better, finds a little bit more consistency. He kind of got shot out of the rotation at times this year, but I think Tillman is a player who, if he has the right things fall in place for him, he can get better. And I want to shout out Zaire Williams as well. One of the few players who plays better his rookie season in the NBA than his freshman season in college. It looked like the NBA was an easier style of game for him. And Memphis taking him as early as they did was pretty surprising. So the fact that he played as well as he did, I think he's really warranted that 76 overall rating, and he could definitely jump into the 80s as early as next offseason, or maybe the offseason after that, which is a really good sign because Memphis, this is an example of the rich getting richer there. Zach Kleiman, a phenomenal executive, and Memphis heading in the right direction. Atlanta, Trae Young, definitely got him in the top 10 in the NBA as well right now, or at least that top 15 range with that 91 overall. Very talented player, one of the few guys in the league that you could look at being a player who could potentially lead the league in scoring and also lead the league in assists. He's that good of a player. I'm a Mavericks fan myself, but there is no love lost for Trae Young. He is such a talented young player. So hats off to him. Mavs, Hawks fans, hopefully you guys are getting along, because I see it on Twitter that anytime Trae Young does something wrong or Luka does something wrong, the other fan base lets them know about it. And I don't know why, because you're talking about two of the top players in the world. We should be cheering for the other one to be successful. That was a good trade for both sides. I think the Mavericks won that trade as a Mavs fan myself, because I think Luka is a little bit better than Trae Young. But it's not like a team got ripped off or lost that trade. It's a win-win scenario. Both teams got who they wanted. Both teams have made a conference finals, and both sides should be happy. The only time you should be cheering against the other guy is when it's a Hawks versus Mavericks matchup, which is only twice a year as of now. We'll see if we get a finals matchup of those two down the road. How awesome would that be? Then I also on here want to talk about Onyeka Okongwu, a player who, if he stays healthy, gets a little bit more minutes, I could see him making a massive jump into that 80 overall realm as well. He's a talented player, specifically defensively. He's got all the length, the understanding. And I think when he gets more opportunity and more run there in Atlanta, especially if they move off some of those bigger contracts like John Collins or Clint Capella, we could see Onyeka Okongwu become a legitimate household name at some point in the league. Then going on to Miami, Jimmy Butler, 91 overall. I feel, again, this postseason was huge for him in cementing how good of a player he is. And you're going to see I'm higher on Bam Adebayo than most. I gave him a 90 overall, arguably the best defender in the NBA. He does everything you ask for him to do defensively as a center. Of course, he's not the biggest center in the league. He's a little undersized, but that actually plays to his advantage. He's still great in drop coverage because of how athletic he is and how smart he is as a defender. But because of how small he is in comparison to other natural 7-footers, Adebayo can move out laterally on the perimeter. You can use him to trap double. You can use him to switch, which has actually been really effective for Miami, one of the teams that switches more than any other team in the NBA. They're right there with the Los Angeles Clippers in terms of switching, but Adebayo gives them so much flexibility. And that's really the difference between Miami and LA. Talking about the Clippers, Adebayo is the missing piece that the Clippers should be hunting for right now, is a center who can switch out in space, also be decent in drop coverage. And the reason why they're still searching for that is it's hard to find players like that, which is what makes Adebayo so special. I have Duncan Robinson as a 76 as well. I think he's a better player than that 76 rating though, but based off his recent performances, he just didn't shoot the 3 ball as well this year. I don't agree with Eric Spoelstra's decision to move away from him in the postseason though. Gravity shooting is extremely important. I understand the idea on why Robinson came out, and I'm not saying it was a terrible decision, but I myself would not have executed that way, because I think Robinson having rhythm throughout series would have been really valuable for Miami. And I think if Robinson had gotten more playtime, probably would have played closer to that 77, 78, 79 rating, and maybe back into the 80s if everything's going right for him and he's knocking down big shots. like we've seen him do in the past. I think he's an underrated playmaker, specifically going right. He and Bam Adebayo have pretty good chemistry. Heat fans know exactly what I'm talking about when those two are kind of running a little bit of dribble handoff stagger action. And I think Robinson here for me could be a player that if he gets traded could pop off in a new situation. Now looking at Charlotte, LaMelo Ball, headliner here, 87 overall. I have him right in that Darius Garland here for ratings, and I have Miles Bridges as an 86. I think a player who a lot of people do like. Obviously, the athleticism has really popped off on social media and has given him a lot of notoriety. But at the same time, I don't think people really understand the nuances to his game, how good he's actually gotten offensively, and how he utilizes that athleticism as more than just a lob threat or a transition machine. He is someone who has gotten much better in every element of the game since being drafted in the late lottery. And I think Charlotte, those two players, LaMelo, Miles Bridges, are the foundational pieces there. I would be surprised if Miles Bridges leaves in free agency. And then James Bouknight, 75 overall. And that's going to be high for a player who did not even play in 45 games this year for Charlotte. And you want to know why? Bouknight is a 3-level scorer who has good athletic feel and can adjust his shot around the rim. I think he's the perfect two guard to complement LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges. And I think this year, new head coach with Kenny Atkinson. Kenny Atkinson's been a guy who wanted to play youth in the past with Jared Allen. And I think he's going to give James Bouknight an opportunity to shine this year. And if Bouknight gets that opportunity, he is going to take full advantage of it. This kid can flat out score the basketball. I think next to LaMelo, next to Miles Bridges, we're going to see Bouknight take a huge step forward. 75 might be low based on what we see from him this season. I'm going to leave it at that. Moving into the Utah Jazz, Rudy Gobert, easily the top-rated player on this team. I don't even think it's a question. Rudy Gobert is the best player on the Utah Jazz as of today. Now, 3, 4, 5 years from now, probably Donovan Mitchell, which is why if you're Utah and you have to trade one, you probably do trade Gobert because he's older than Donovan Mitchell and maybe the upside's not as high. But we're talking about a guy who's been 6-time All-Defense, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. These type of players don't grow on trees. And if you ever hear anyone say that Rudy Gobert gets played off the floor in the playoffs, or if you hear anyone say that Rudy Gobert is bad out in switches, one, they haven't looked at any advanced analytics. And secondly, they haven't watched Rudy Gobert play. Yes, when he gets scored on out in switches, he looks really gangly and clunky and bad. But statistically speaking, he's actually phenomenal in comparison to other centers around the league. The reason I always say Bam Adebayo is arguably the best defensive player in the league is because I still think Gobert is the best defensive player of the league. He is such a good center when it comes to protecting the rim. He's actually good when he's out in switches. He utilizes every single inch of his wingspan and length and standing reach to his advantage at all times. He dominated the series against the Dallas Mavericks without getting shots up at the rim. That is how good he is at every other element of the game. He's arguably the best screen setter in the league. He's arguably the best rebounder in the league. And he's arguably the best defensive player in the league. Those are 3 things that you would want to have on your roster at all times. Gobert, most underrated player in the league right now because of casual narratives around the league, specifically on Twitter and pretty much anywhere else. You look at TikTok. I mean, a lot of people love to hate on Rudy Gobert. Not really sure why. He's a phenomenal player. I think Bojan Bogdanovic is underrated around league circles. I think Mike Conley's overrated around league circles. And Daniil House, I think, is a solid role player that give him some time, put him in the right situation. He can play into a good role for a team. I think he was a nice little bright spot for Utah this year that went under the radar that most media outlets probably wouldn't talk about. Then talking about Sacramento, the Kings here, and a team that's been a lot of fun to talk about, specifically post-trade deadline after the Sabonis-Halliburton trade. And I've got Sabonis and Fox both as 85 overalls. I think they're both good players. I don't know if they're both good enough players to get you into the playoffs by themselves, which is why they only received the 85 rating in comparison to some of my guys who I had 87, 88 range. I think both of them are very good individual talents. I just don't know how much they impact winning, specifically on the defensive end of the floor. Richaun Holmes, one of the better trade candidates this offseason. If I'm a team looking to make a move, Richaun Holmes should be at the top of the radar. The Mavericks made a move for Christian Wood already. I would love to see them still go out and get Richaun Holmes. He's on a nice contract. I still think fits next to Christian Wood fairly well and would be another nice center to have with Luka Doncic. I would love that for Dallas as a potential landing spot. But if your team needs a center at all, look at, like, say, the Toronto Raptors. Richaun Holmes is a definite good option. Justin Holiday, maybe I have him a little too low at 74. I think for a player who's on a very nice cheap contract, maybe he's not the best player in the world by any means, but I think plays into a 3-and-D role relatively well. And I think it's going to be one of the better roster fits, at least for Sacramento, next to Sabonis and Fox this next season, assuming they don't trade him on draft night. Then the New York Knicks, a team that everything went wrong for this past season, besides RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, and Emmanuel Quickley. Those three players all played really well. Barrett played really well all season long. I think very deserving of that 86 overall rating. He is someone who took a huge step forward. Julius Randle regressed back to the mean. That's been a saying I've loved to talk about here on the channel. Regression to the mean. That's the definition of Julius Randle's game this past year. I knew that All-NBA campaign he had the year before was fluky. That was obvious to me. The fact that he shot the three ball so well that season, I think was clear he was not going to be able to repeat that. We saw it. He's still an 84 overall. He's still a valuable, good player. Again, though, just like what we talked about with Tobias Harris, would you want to max out an 84 overall player? I don't think so. Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickley, I have them both at 79 right now. The one limiting factor to them, which I think they both could be better than a 79 rating, is Julius Randle. He does not coincide well with those two guys. I think that Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin, those two have their own chemistry together. When Julius Randle's either injured, out for whatever reason, or just frankly not in the game when those two are in, those two shine. If Julius Randle's sharing the floor with both of them, they don't play as well. And for me, that's why they're limited as 79 overalls. I think New York has a collection of good players. I just don't know if they have enough great players. You're also going to see how low I am on Evan Fournier. I just don't think that he can guard a street light. That's really the biggest concern for me. He can't stay in front of anybody consistently. And until then, I'm not going to buy into Evan Fournier. Terrible contract. I still think an overrated player. I think he always has been, even back when Boston traded for him, back when he was in Orlando. I've never been an Evan Fournier guy. I'm not going to start now. That next contract he signed was terrible for New York. I said it the moment he signed it, and I'm going to say it again now. The Knicks should not have given him that amount of money. Moving into the Los Angeles Lakers, LeBron James, still deserving of 94. I do have him below the Kawhi Leonards of the world, the Giannis's, the Joel Embiid's, because he's just not that player anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? He's into his late 30s, and to be a 94 overall at his age is a phenomenal showing. LeBron James, there's no disrespect here. Anthony Davis, I have as an 89 overall. You just can't be so inefficient as a jump shooter and stay in the 90s for me. He was a net negative when he was shooting the ball outside of 15 feet this year for LA, and he's always injured. Okay, those two things put together do not make you a 90 overall player. Yes, he's still one of the better defensive players in the league. Yes, he's still one of the best big men in the league. But you can't look at me and say this past season was indicative of a 90 overall. In fact, I don't even believe it was indicative of an 89 overall, but I'm going to let his name and history keep him up in that upper echelon of 80s because he's deserved that and earned that with his play in previous seasons. Russell Westbrook, 84 overall. I know some people are going to look at him and say, well, he should be even lower. I disagree with that. In fact, I maybe considered having him higher. This fit in LA is brutal. He does not fit with LeBron and a Anthony Davis who can't shoot the basketball. That does not fit. Anthony Davis is not as good of a jump shooter as everyone thinks. If you disagree with me, pause the video, go look at his stats quick, go look at his career three-point percentage. You'll probably be shocked. Come back to the video and say, wow, this guy's kind of on it. Russell Westbrook, I think just terrible fit here. If he was on a different roster, probably we'd still be talking about him as a triple-level machine who helps his team win, can dominate the basketball, probably can't play outside of that style, and that's the issue here with the Lakers, right? And then you're going to notice how many 60 overalls and low 70s this team has, which is realistically the issue with the route that they went. You can't just sign a whole bunch of minimum guys and expect to be good. I talked about that last offseason. No one believed me. Everyone thought, just like Vegas, that LA would be the best team in the Western Conference. I said, watch out for Golden State. I said, watch out for Phoenix. They're still really good. The Dallas Mavericks might get better. And those were the three best teams in the West. Dallas, Memphis was in there as well. I did not see Memphis coming to the level that they did, but ultimately those 4 teams were head and shoulders above LA had even Anthony Davis been healthy, I think. So the Lakers, you just can't have that many role players. This roster, pretty bad. Moving on to the Orlando Magic and talking about bad rosters. No, I'm just kidding. Orlando doesn't have as bad of a roster as you'd maybe assume. The issue is they're void of top-end talent. Wendell Carter being your best player is probably not going to get the job done in the East or the West. The East is much better right now as well, so you really can't get the job done like that. But I think it is pretty clear Wendell Carter is just a better player than Nikola Vucevic right now. So if you're a Magic fan, leave a like on the video right now if you're excited the fact that you still have a Chicago Bulls first rounder and the better younger player, because Wendell Carter has gotten much better since the trade. Vucevic has regressed since the trade, and I think Orlando easily won that deal. Franz Wagner was a great draft pick as well. Jonathan Isaac, we haven't seen him play for almost 2 years. If he ever plays again, he's one of the best defensive players in the world. 80 overall, definitely deserving for him. Markelle Fultz, I need to see a little bit more out of him. It's just been so inconsistent to give him anything at the 80 overall mark. 77, pretty good. Jalen Suggs, I have as a 76 right now. There's no denying he struggled his rookie season, but by the end of the second year, I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about him in that 80 to 81 overall realm, because year 2 guards usually do take a step forward. Guards tend to struggle early in their careers anyways. I think Suggs, a player who lives at the rim, you're going to have some of those issues right away in year 1 of your career. I've talked about him at length in other videos. Suggs, a very good young player who I think, even though there's year 1 struggles, don't sell your stock on Jalen Suggs. RJ Hampton, though, you can sell your stock on that. I don't care. Sell your stock on Bol. Fine with me. Those 2 players are not going to be long-term impact players for Orlando. I promise you that. Dallas Mavericks, and what a day for the Dallas Mavericks today. I'm recording this is the day they traded for Christian Wood. You guys are seeing it the day after, and I'm so stoked the fact that Dallas was able to pull Christian Wood away from Houston. That is a huge win for Dallas. Luka Doncic, one of the best players in the world, 97 overall. That's actually tied for second. I believe he's right in that realm of being the best player in the world. I think he can compete with Kawhi, Giannis, Joel Embiid, and some other players that we haven't named yet in this video. With that 97 overall realm, he is right there knocking on the door. No one can really stop him one-on-one. Kawhi Leonard's maybe one of the few players that has a shot at it. Dorian Finney-Smith, one of the more underrated players in the league, one of the better defenders in the league. The fact that he didn't make all defense this year, Matisse Thybulle did, is ridiculous to me. I don't think that the national media watches enough games in general to actually vote on things. Dorian Finney-Smith's a much better positional defender, even though he doesn't have the blocks or steals. He actually goes out and guards guys. He's more of a stopper than Matisse Thybulle is. Jalen Brunson, you see I'm not going crazy on my stock here on Brunson. 84 overall, a player, again, where I would not want to max him, kind of right in that Tobias Harris realm, where he's good, not great. I think Brunson's vital for this Mavs team. I think that it's going to be hard for them to get back to where they were without him. But at the same time, I don't think you can just say, oh, Jalen Brunson's a max level player. Christian Wood, I wouldn't give a max either. And that's why I have him right at that 84 overall realm, because his athleticism, I think, is getting really undersold right now. People are talking about a rim running big. Go back and watch some Christian Wood highlights in Detroit. I fell in love with him in Detroit before anyone knew his name, before he signed with Houston. I deemed him as one of the breakout candidates for most improved player before he had played a game with the Rockets. And had he stayed healthy that season, probably would have won the award. He is a very talented offensive player who defensively around the rim struggles at times. I still think Dallas needs to find a way to improve in that regard, which is why I talked about Rashawn Holmes earlier. But you're looking at a really serious, strong top 4. Maxi Kleber, a player who, if he finds that 3-point shot, could be back right around that 80 overall mark. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a big question mark right now. I'm not even sure if he'll ever play another game with Dallas, but if he doesn't, that's okay. I mean, they could survive losing him based on Brunson's emergence. Reggie Bullock, I think maybe I have him a little underrated here. His defensive integrity on point guards is huge for this Mavericks team. But at the same time, I think offensively is extremely limited. Can't really dribble the basketball, which it sounds like I'm being a little over the top. I'm not. He just doesn't dribble the ball well. Spencer Dinwiddie is one of the more overrated players in the league right now because the Mavericks started winning after trading for him. He was shooting 36% from the field through the playoffs. Tell me how that's warranting of an 80 overall. I think he's important. He does a lot of nice things. but I think a 76 probably right in that right realm. Dwight Powell, everyone's favorite player in Dallas to hate on. 75, he's an okay center. I don't think he's a starting level center, but is he worthy of playing in the rotation? Yes, because he's a phenomenal dive man as a big, which is there's value to that, right? Going on to Brooklyn, Kevin Durant, 95 overall, again, right in that top realm with the Kawhi Leonards, Luka Doncic's of the world. He's right in that conversation, right? Kyrie Irving, I have as an 89, a player who offensively, again, very talented. You can't argue that. Ben Simmons, I have as an 86, and that's going to feel high to a lot of people. The issue with Ben Simmons is fit. You need to put him around the right players who can also defend, but can also knock down shots, handle the basketball in different ways. Simmons is a phenomenal transition player, one of the better defenders in the entire world. And based on just those two things alone, you should have him at least in the low 80s, if not the mid 80s, which is where I landed on for him. Now, the issue is we haven't seen him play basketball in a year, and the last basketball we saw him play was really lackluster against the Atlanta Hawks in the with the chance to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Simmons, though, for me, still a player who a lot of teams would love to have. Maybe the price tag isn't what they want. Maybe the fit makes it clunky. But in a vacuum, Ben Simmons, a good, talented player. I don't think that there's much to talk about with that. Andre Drummond, 79, is going to seem high to some people, and I understand why. Not that I would love Andre Drummond to be the center for my team, but I think when you look at his rebounding numbers, they are rather historic. He is one of the best rebounders of all time, and that is not being facetious. That is not being over the top. Go look at his numbers. Nobody rebounds the basketball like Andre Drummond in the league. It's just the reality. He dominates the glass coming off the bench this year for Philly, and then in the games he started for Brooklyn, he was a rebounding monster again. Yes, he's got deficiencies, but anyone who rebounds the ball that well should be hovering around the 80 overall mark, I think. And I like to point out this team's got some young players. Cam Thomas, Day'Ron Sharpe, Kessler Edwards. Those are players I could see take steps forward going into next season. Specifically, Cam Thomas. I love his confidence. That's the biggest thing about him that I think is going to elevate him long term. Denver, the MVP, back-to-back years, Nikola Jokic, I have as a 97 overall. And some people are going to be confused about that. How is the back-to-back MVP not the highest rated player? Well, defensively, even though some people are going to say, oh, look at the advanced analytics. And yes, the advanced analytics do suggest that Jokic is a good defender. Did you watch the playoffs? I mean, you're really limited to drop coverage, and you play a team that has one of the best shooters of all time, if not the best shooter of all time, and you get exposed terribly bad and almost swept off the floor. Luckily for them, they did win a game, so it was a gentleman's sweep. But Jokic, the defensive limitation still for me when I'm looking at him from a coaching perspective, doesn't mean I can put him at a 99, but I do think 97 overall is still a really high rating. And his offensive game is so spectacular that he's well deserving of that. I do not feel like I'm lowballing him at all here. Zeke Naji's a player I'm hoping we can see some more progression from. I think he's an intriguing young player coming out of, grew up in Minnesota. Already at this point of his career, we've seen some flashes. I like to see some more from him. And Bones Highland, I loved him out of VCU last draft. I think that's going to be one of the staples that Tim Connolly leaves his impression on this team. Obviously not with them anymore as he transitioned over to Minnesota, but Bones Highland, he's going to age really well there in Denver, next to Jamal Murray, next to Nikola Jokic. I think that he probably enters the starting lineup sooner than a lot of people are expecting. I think Bones Highland probably by year 3 of his career is a full-time starter for Denver. And I like this team a lot going into next season when they're fully healthy. Indiana Pacers here, team that's young, team that's got some bright spots. The thing that they're lacking right now, though, is one of those top guys. Again, I think Tyrese Halliburton, a very good young player, someone who we could probably see make an all-star game or two in his career, maybe 3 or 4. I wouldn't be shocked. He's going to rack up assists. He's going to rack up points. He's going to shoot very efficiently from the field and from 3. He does have some flaws into his game, though. I think the commentary around Halliburton and Sabonis has been that Indiana absolutely fleeced Sacramento. And I think, yes, Indiana did win that trade, and I think they won it fairly easily, but it wasn't a fleecing, okay? Sabonis is a good player. Halliburton's also a really good player. And Halliburton's 4 years younger. I would opt for Halliburton myself, but it's not like Halliburton is the next Michael Jordan. I think that's where we're kind of lost ourselves a little bit. Miles Turner is also a very good player who I think fits really well next to Halliburton. And Buddy Hield, to me, is one of the more underrated players in the league. Yes, his contract's not great. Would I want to be paying someone who's a 78 overall in my eyes about $19 million? No, I wouldn't. But I think his three-point shooting is extremely valuable. And I think a lot of teams, when his contract's up, are going to be interested in him on a mid-level exception. And that's where we're going to see him shine, is when he's on a cheaper deal. Teams are going to be like, wow, we got this guy for $10 million. And you're going to love that. And I think Buddy Hield, it's all about narrative with his career right now. Again, a player who got traded for DeMarcus Cousins back when Cousins was in his prime with Sacramento. He's really, at this point, I think underrated just simply because his contract's looked at as non-desirable. New Orleans here, the Pelicans, and this was one of the harder ones to rate. I ended up with Brandon Ingram as the best player on the team as of right now, simply because Zion has not been available, and he's also dealt with injuries fairly consistently, which does make it tough for me to put him into that 90 realm like I think he could be when he's healthy. CJ McCollum, I landed on 86. Again, a player who changed kind of what New Orleans was looking like down the stretch of the season. He played really well with this team. And that top trio is very, very talented. Herb Jones, 78. I think he's a fan favorite there in New Orleans. He was one of my favorite players in last year's draft, and his size has affected this team tremendously because he's able to guard multiple positions. He's a multi-level defender, able to protect the rim, guard out in space, contest three-point shots to the degree of blocking them. Very rare to see a player capable of doing those things. I think Herb Jones, a very nice young player. Trey Murphy's going to take a step forward as well. I have him as a 76 right now. I think by the end of the year, we could look at him as maybe an 80 overall type guy. I loved him out of Virginia as well. Another example of a 3-and-D player who has a little bit more athleticism upside to him than most people give him credit for. You're also going to notice I'm a little bit lower on Alvarado than most. His defense is valuable, but he's a little more gimmicky than actually just flat out good defensively. Yes, I think he is a good defender, but is he going to ever be a shutdown guy? No, I don't think so. I think he's a limited defensive playmaker with a more so limited offensive game. And that's not a bad thing. 73 overall for a guy who went undrafted, that's a good rating to have. It really is. But going into next year, do I think that Jose Alvarado is better than a Larry Nance, Jackson Hayes, Trey Murphy? No, I just don't think that. And that's okay, because he's going to play perfectly into the role that New Orleans needs him to play in. So Pelicans fans, you should be happy about that. Pistons now, Cade Cunningham here, 85 overall. You're going to notice there's a little bit of a trend there with the 85 overalls from last year's class, specifically the top end players. Then let's look at Jeremy Grant, 83. We'll see how long he's with the Detroit Pistons after this video comes out. There are a ton of rumors swirling right now that they'll trade him. I'm sure Pistons fans are going to listen to Troy Weaver and they're going to say, oh, we have no interest in trading him. And then maybe a week later he'll get dealt. We'll see. Maybe trade, or maybe the draft night would be a good night to see Jeremy Grant potentially on the move. Isaiah Livers, one of the more underrated players, I think, in the league. I don't think a lot of people know what he brings to the table. He's extremely valuable. You're going to see him lower on Hamidou Diallo than most. I just don't really think that this guy is going to be someone who's super impactful on a good playoff team at any point. I think he played a role on a really bad Pistons team for a reason. And going into the future, if Detroit wants to get serious about winning with Cade Cunningham, we're going to see Hamidou Diallo lose a lot of minutes. Toronto here now, and talking about that 85 overall, Scotty Barnes fits in right there with Cade Cunningham. Last year's class was so good, specifically at the top. Those top four players are all really great. Pascal Siakam, I feel like maybe a little low as an 87. I just feel like there are some things I'd like to see him do a little bit more to get up into that 88, 89, maybe 90 range. But I think 87's kind of right in that realm. It feels low because he made All-NBA, but I think he's one of the worst All-NBA players this year, at least. You know, yes, it technically puts you as a top 15 guy, but had Kawhi been healthy, had PG been healthy, would Siakam have made it? Probably not, right? So no disrespect to him. This Raptors team, again, there's 5 guys in the 80s here, and there's not even an 80 or 81. Goes to show how much I believe in this young core. If OG Anunoby was healthy, he could have been right around that 85 realm as well. Probably bumped him down a little bit just because he hadn't been as available. Precious Achiuwa, I think we're going to start seeing more and more and more from this kid. If the Raptors don't make a move for a big man, it's because they believe Achiuwa is the future of that position, and I don't blame him. Delano Banton, I think, is also going to take some steps forward. I have him as a 74 right now, which is maybe a little generous. He hasn't shown that at the NBA level as much, but he showed it at the G League level. And it's all about confidence for this kid. If he can get onto the NBA level and just play the way that I know he's capable of, we could see him maybe jumping into that high 70s realm as well by midseason this year. Then we look at the Houston Rockets. Jalen Green, I have an 84. So you're going to notice he's one overall below where I had Mobley, Cunningham, and Scotty Barnes. And I think, you look at the beginning of the year last year, and it did take him a while to settle in. I think he was just a hair off from those other guys in terms of his performance last season, but it doesn't change my thoughts on what he will be 3, 4, 5 years from now, which is one of the more dynamic scoring guards in the league. He is incredibly fun to watch. He's a blur in transition, both with and without the ball, jumps out of the gym. Jalen Green's a special player. John Wall, we haven't seen him play, 80 overall. It kind of just went basic with him. Didn't really know exactly where to put him. I could see him being a little bit better than an 80 if he's rested and in good shape. I could see him being worse than an 80 if he's not rested and not in good shape, if he's not been taking care of his body. That's the issue, is I haven't gotten to see him play for quite some time. I think Eric Gordon, 76 overall, is a little generous as well. For some reason, people like the idea that Eric Gordon's a good defensive player. This Rockets team gave up the most points in the league. Eric Gordon was analytically one of the worst defenders on the team. Okay, you're not a good defensive player if you analytically based don't defend well on the worst defensive team in the league. That's just not going to be a recipe for success. I think he's become really overstated in terms of his defensive impact. Yes, he's physical. Can he play decent defense in certain situations? Yes, but I just think that he's one of the more overrated players right now in terms of league discussions. Garrison Matthews, though, one of the more underrated players. I have him as a 73 overall. Some of you might be saying who right now. One thing I love about Garrison Matthews is his competitive nature. He fights through every screen. He draws so many moving screens, probably more than any other player in the league. I wish I had the statistics on that, because he is phenomenal at drawing moving screens, because he, again, puts a lot of pressure on the screening player by fighting so hard through those screens. So that's a huge credit to him. I'm excited to see more Usman Garuba next year as well. And Trevelin Queen, someone who I talked about in my breakout players, he is going to take a big step forward on the NBA level. He shined last year in the G League. I think Trevelin Queen, he's had a long road to get to the NBA. He makes himself a prominent NBA player this year who's going to stick in a rotation at some point. San Antonio, staying in Texas with the Spurs. Jakob Poeltl's the player I really want to talk about here. One of the more underrated players in the entire league. A lot of people, you can tell if they don't watch Spurs basketball, they're not excited about Jakob Poeltl. And yes, even though I do watch him, and I don't necessarily, I'm not like, oh, when I'm turning on NBA League Pass, do I get to watch the Charlotte Hornets and LaMelo Ball throwing lobs to Miles Bridges? Or do I want to watch a Spurs game with Jakob Poeltl holding down the paint? I tend to enjoy the Hornets games a little bit more, but watching the Spurs game, there's kind of a beauty in Jakob Poeltl's defensive capabilities, specifically with his verticality around the rim. He challenges better than most, and he actually gives a lot of trouble to some of the top guards in the league with his capability as a drop coverage defender. I like that a lot. You notice I have Josh Primo as a 74. I was maybe a little more generous with his rating. I think he played more like a 72 or 71 overall when you just look at kind of the realm. But I think that there's something there for this kid. I think that over time, he can maybe start unlocking some of that stuff. And Devin Vassell is ready to take a huge jump. I wouldn't be surprised by the end of next year if we're talking about him as the second best player on the Spurs behind DeJounte Murray. Devin Vassell, I loved him out of Florida State. I thought he had every element of what it takes to become a really good player. Then the Spurs took him, and I thought maybe he'll become a great player. And he's starting to show some of those flashes. Get ready for Devin Vassell to become a more popular player in the league. Phoenix, the Suns here now at this spot. Devin Booker, I was a 90 overall. I was so thoroughly impressed with him this postseason. He got way better from where he was last year. There's no denying that. I know Phoenix didn't make it as far, but Devin Booker was much better. He knocks down pretty much every shot when he gets to his spot. He is incredible in the mid-range area, and he continues to get better defensively. He has really impressed me. He is not the same player he was 3, 4, 5 years ago. And that's a testament to him. That's a testament to his trainers, Suns development staff. He's great. And also DeAndre Ayton, I think, is a good player. I think maybe a little bit overrated with how people talk about him. I would not give DeAndre Ayton a max. I find him right in that 84, 85 realm where I wouldn't want to max this player out, but he was a valuable asset for sure. Mikal Bridges, though, what a talented defensive player. Maybe one of the better perimeter defenders in the league, if not the best perimeter defender in the league. He makes life tough. I was actually pretty surprised with how well Luka played against Mikal Bridges, and I know that's going to be surprising because I'm a Mavs fan, and I think Luka Doncic is one of the best players in the world. Mikal Bridges in the past has had Luka Doncic's number in regular season matchups. Luka kind of babied Mikal Bridges in the postseason. Part of that is because the refs let them play, and Doncic really backed down Bridges to the point of probably offensive fouls if we're talking the regular season, but the refs let him play through it, and Doncic won that matchup, which was surprising to me because Bridges is such a good defensive player. He always pops on the screen. He does all the little things right, and every single team would be so much better if they could add a Mikal Bridges to their roster. Going on to Oklahoma City here now, I've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as an 87, kind of right in that realm again with the Darius Garlands of the world. I feel like that's probably the proper range for a lot of the guards that are on the come up right now in the league that we've talked about already. Josh Giddey, I loved his game coming out of the NBL. Glad to see he had so much success his rookie season. And then the rest of this roster, you're looking at players who are trade candidates. I think Lou Dort, Trey Mann, they're ready to take steps forward. This team is interesting. They're young. I think JaMychal Green could play a role on this team as long as they let him actually show up and compete. And I think that would be good because maybe he could restore some of his trade value playing next to Shai and Josh Giddey and Lou Dort. And maybe they can move him for a first-round pick or a couple second-rounders. Ultimately, though, OKC, they've got some fun young players. Not anything I'm going to really buy into quite yet. But if they nail that number 2 overall pick, we could see this team maybe make a push for the playoffs, surprisingly. That's how good Shai and Josh Giddey are. You get the right player in next to them. Don't be surprised if we're talking about Oklahoma City after picks 2 and 12 being way more competitive than a lot of people are talking about. The Minnesota Timberwolves now, and this was one of the harder teams to give ratings to. Cat I designated as an 88. I think even though he made All-NBA this past year, I would still prefer guys like Rudy Gobert, Bam Adebayo, myself over him. Simply because they are much better defensively, both protecting the rim and out in space. Anthony Edwards, he's on the come up. He's one of the better young players in the league. Kind of got him right next to LaMelo Ball in terms of the overall rating. I think those two guys go back and forth on who should have been the number 1 overall pick in that class. D'Lo, there's a lot of hate for right now. He's a valuable player. Minnesota arguably wouldn't be in the playoffs without him. This past season, he shut down the Clippers himself. He really closed out that game in the play-in game between the 7 and 8 seed. He deserves a lot of credit. Patrick Beverley changed the culture there. Jared Vanderbilt, one of the more underrated players in the league. Malik Beasley, another example of contract narrative, really hating on a player. Yes, 75% of his shots come from behind the three-point line, but that's good for this Minnesota team. That spacing helps D'Lo, helps Ant, helps Patrick Beverley, and I think even to a certain extent helps Cat's post-up game. Malik Beasley's a threat from behind the line. I'm not sure why he gets so much hate. I also really like Nathan Knight. You notice I have him as a 70 overall. He's one of those two-way contracts I decided to include. If you haven't watched Nathan Knight play, get ready for him. He's an athletic freak who can play make a bit, bring the ball up the floor as a forward. And I'm talking a bigger forward, maybe a 4 or a small ball 5. He is a lot of fun to watch. I actually had the luxury of watching him in person a couple times this year. And I think Nathan Knight is primed for a breakout in the near future. Portland, the Trailblazers here now. Damian Lillard right at that 90 overall mark. He's one of the top 15 players in the world. There's no denying that. Anthony Simons had a huge jump forward. I have him as an 80 overall. Blazers fans are going to maybe say that's a little low. I understand why, but I think when Dame's back, we're going to see Simons take a little bit less of a predominant scorer role. Not completely out of that role, but Damian Lillard's going to be the man. So Anthony Simons, his numbers maybe drop a little bit, and I think he'll play right into that 80 overall mark statistically. And remember, Simons, I don't think is going to be one of the better defensive guards in the league either. Trendon Watford, though, really impressed me this year. I thought he was a draft-worthy player last year. I was one of the few people to have him in the top 60 on my big board. And I actually have him as a 75 overall based on how he played. He was really efficient scoring the basketball, which you just can't say about guys like CJ Ellaby and Keldon Blevins. Sorry, Keldon, you're about to catch a stray here. One of the worst players I've ever seen play live, just at the NBA level specifically. Obviously, I've watched high school and college, and Keldon Blevins is better than those players. But at the NBA level, it was almost unbearable. Doesn't really do a lot. He's small. Sorry, Keldon, you're catching a stray, but 63 overall. Maybe I'm being generous here. I didn't put anyone in the 50s. Keldon, DeAndre Jordan, Udonis Haslem maybe would have been worthy to be in the 50s. That's how bad they were this season. Golden State here now. The Warriors, Steph Curry, 95 overall. Again, right in that top tier of players. Draymond Green Evans, an 87, which is going to surprise people. Yes, I believe Draymond Green's an 87. One of the best defensive players in the world, if not the best defensive player. I think it's a three-way race, really, between Bam Adebayo, Rudy Gobert, and Draymond Green. They all do it in different ways, but they're all elite. Andrew Wiggins, I'm so glad to see him take a huge step forward into that 85 tenure. Again, this is a player who is capable of putting up 25 a night. And the fact that he's adjusted himself to being the team's primary on-ball defender, who's really great at that, by the way. He's one of the best offensive rebounders from the corner, which is a very underrated skill to have as a wing player, specifically when you play for Golden State and you shoot as many deep shots as they do. You're bound to have some long rebounds. Wiggins, so athletic, chases those down with ease. And by the way, he can flush it on you. He's got a smooth mid-range jump shot. Wiggins, I mean, again, this is an example of a player who got hated on because of his contract. Would I want to pay him a max? Probably not. But heck, I'd pay him $23-24 million a year happily. He is a great young player still who is starting to enter his prime. That's really where we're at with him in terms of his age, and he's putting all the pieces together. I'm so happy to see that for him. Klay Thompson, I have him as an 85. That jump shot hasn't gone anywhere. We've seen him hit huge shots for Golden State this postseason. Yes, maybe he hasn't been as consistent, and we haven't seen him athletically, defensively at the same level. That's why he's not a 90 overall anymore like he would have been. But 85, I still think more than fair. I think he's going to be even better next season, so don't sell your stock on Klay quite yet. James Wiseman, I have as 75. I do want to touch on him real quick. If he gets traded, the team that lands him is going to be very happy with the end result. He is a freak athlete as a center who is going to be good in a traditional screen and roll oriented offense. I think Golden State, a little too complex with all the movement off ball, all the off ball screening. The game moves really fast in Golden State, and it's not right for every player. That's why we saw Kelly Oubre struggle so much last year. James Wiseman, we might see him in the same setting here where he just doesn't fit Golden State's offense. Even though you would think a big player who's so athletic, should he be able to replace Kevon Looney and do it well? You would think yes, but his processing speed, not quite there. But let's say you put him into Indiana or a team like Dallas that, hey, we're looking for an athletic big who can catch lobs. Tell me why Wiseman can't be good there. I really don't see a reason why. He's a freak athlete who can punish people on the boards and flush it home on guys. And if you get him into a simpler system, I think he's ready to take a step forward. Golden State, it's going to take some time, though, to really get the most out of him. I'm interested to see what happens with him this offseason. The final team here before we get into the rookies, and that's the Washington Wizards, the team that is the thorn in my side because as a Mavs fan, I was so sad to see Kristaps Porzingis traded, but the Mavs have recovered well, specifically with the Christian Wood deal, and it's water under the bridge at this point. I'm hoping the best for KP. Brad Beal is an 88. Again, I think defensive limitations here, and his availability was a little limited this past season. Maybe he should be a little bit closer to 90. Maybe 89 is the best rating for him. I'm kind of curious what your guys' thoughts are on Beal. KPF is an 86. Again, availability is really the biggest thing that hurts him here. I think if he's healthy, you could probably have him right around that 87, 88 range, but he just misses so much time that it is tough to rate him that high. Kuzma, 81, probably feels low to Wizards fans. He is somewhat ball dominant. I think Kuzma's good. I still think the Wizards won the Russell Westbrook trade, just given how much flexibility and ability to pivot their franchise if they need to. They're in a really good spot now because of that move. Kuzma was a great addition there as well. I do like Thomas Bryant still, who's headed to free agency. I know Wizards fans love Daniel Gafford. KCP is a nice role player, kind of right around that 75, 76 range, like I talked about with Wesley Matthews. I think KCP is just a little bit better of a player than Wes, though, specifically at this point of their careers, which is why KCP is a little bit higher overall. Kispert, I think he's going to get better going into next season. Didn't shoot the ball very well this year. I would expect that to change going into next season. Rookie season, it seems like they always feel a little fast to players, no matter how experienced they were in college. Kispert, give him a year to adjust to the NBA speed. He will be better next year. And Anthony Gill, again, one of the worst players I saw this year. Sorry, Gill, if you're watching, you cut us straight here. But yeah, it hurt me watching Wizards games when he was on the floor. I'm not going to lie. So incoming rookies, here's my top 16. Paolo Banchero is a 79 overall. I think he's probably the most NBA ready player in this class, specifically when it comes to scoring the rock. He is going to be really good. I would have to bet on him winning Rookie of the Year. Just as of right now, I think he's the most ready. Chet Holmgren, though, probably impacts winning the most, especially early on in his career. He's been around winning. He's going to continue to win. And if he goes to the right situation, say they make a push for the playoffs, Chet Holmgren, I wouldn't be surprised if he wins Rookie of the Year either. 78 overall. I decided on a three-way tie here for Jaden Ivey, Jabari Smith, and Keegan Murray at 77 overall. Jabari Smith, I thought about having lower, maybe at 76 or 75 overall, which some people are going to think that's crazy. And I ultimately decided, yeah, that's a little crazy as well. I kept him at 77 because of how good of a shot maker he is, and I think the defense is going to translate rather quickly. He needs to get way better dribbling the basketball, though. Right now, we're talking about Jabari Smith as probably an elite role player, as someone that I see him translating as. If he can't dribble the basketball, I don't see much higher ceiling than that. Even though there's a lot of stuff to love, he's got to get better at those areas. Ben Mathurin, 76 overall. I think he's going to be a good wing. You're seeing a little bit of sophomore love here with the guys like Ivy, Murray, Mathurin there, 76 and above for those three. Shaedon Sharpe, his athleticism alone at least puts him at 75 for me. He's an intriguing athlete. I would be surprised if 2K has him lower than a 75, just because there's going to be a lot of eyes on him. They're trying to sell a game. And for me looking at it, I think the athletic profile is incredible. Talking about Mark Williams as well, 7'2". I'd have him as a 74 overall right away. I think he can be impactful on day one. AJ Griffin's shooting keeps him at a 74. He's going to shoot over 40% from three his rookie season, which is really rare to see something like that. If he doesn't shoot that well, I'd be pretty surprised because he's got a really pro-style jump shot right now that's quick. He's able to use an escape dribble to get it off, and he's just poised for the NBA game. It's no surprise that his father not only played in the league, but is also a coach in the league right now. Johnny Davis, 73. I think he's probably one of the more players prone to early struggles. We'll see if he does. EJ Liddell, a junior here, 73 overall. I think he's going to have a nice, impactful rookie season. Ron Harper Jr., this is going to be a shocker to a lot of people. I see a lot of other people that think Ron Harper Jr. is not even worthy of being selected. They need to go back and rewatch Ron Harper Jr. Very technically sound. Coaches will fall in love with him. He's going to be the Herb Jones of this year's class. He's going to be impactful right away in year one. He's not going to be as athletic. He's not going to block three-point shots, but he's just going to be a solid, stout defender. I see him at a 72 overall. Jaden Hardy, he's more of a pro-ready scorer off the bench. 72 for him. Jalen Duren, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to see this. I have him below Mark Williams for my year one rating, but I think this ceiling is super high for him. I think 2-3 years from now, he could be one of the best players from this class because of how he's going to emerge defensively with his switchability, his athleticism, and his ability to grab rebounds with tenacity. I think he's going to be a phenomenal lob threat and actually a really nice pick and roll big as well. Walker Kessler, I have him as a 71. You can't teach 7'1" size, and you can teach good drop coverage, but you can't really teach great innate drop coverage. Again, a little bit of sophomore love here. Walker Kessler ready to play well right away. And then Ochai Agbaji, my 16th player right now from this class, I have as a 71 overall. And remember, this is the start of the game. This is what I think the players are going to be coming in. So no 80s. That's pretty notable to say. And the top 16 gets down to a 71. But again, this is before any of them have played an NBA game. I think really quickly into the year, these things could change. And that's why we have roster updates, right? So that players get their ratings changed a little bit. Maybe Agbaji proves me wrong, starts playing like a 74, 75. I could see that. I'm interested to see your guys' thoughts on the incoming rookie class, how you would rate them as well. I know this is probably one of the more anticipated components of today's video, so hopefully you guys did really enjoy. If you did, like and also subscribe for more NBA content. And then also comment Ayo 2K if you made it to this part of the video. Lets me know you made it all the way through and that you enjoyed today's video. It would mean a lot to see those comments. Thanks again, guys, so much for watching. Really do appreciate each and every one of you. A lot of work went into this video, so show your love in the comment section and also by hitting that like. And we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.